Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So I just got back from the lumber yard, picked up a bunch of the wood that I'm going to need for this next project, and just to show you what I've got drawn up for our project here. So it's going to be a little cart for basically moving tools around or whatever when I'm working on things. And so I've got a small cut list here, but it's not all the items that I need. So what I like to do is I don't do any drafting software or anything complicated like that. I draw up the basic design here so I can get the the main measurements of the height, the width, length, all that, and just kind of figure out the overall scope of what I need. And the cut list will include like the first main items. So like these are all the items I need to build the framework. So the other thing too is I don't like, see, if you draft it all up and then you cut everything all at once according to how you've drafted it and all that, there's always going to be something that comes up that you didn't expect or that doesn't work out the way you thought. So that always throws off your measurements and your pre-cut pieces. So if you cut a whole bunch of all these pieces and then you go to fit something together like this board here that's going to go in between these two, and oh, it's a 1/16 of an inch or an 1/8 of an inch too short or too long or whatever, it just becomes too much of a pain, and that's just not how I want to deal with doing this. So so what I like to do is I just cut out the framework, and then as I get these together, I will cut to fit these pieces that are going to go inside in the middle. So that to me just works a lot better. Cutting to fit, it's an exact fit versus hoping that it's going to come out right and all that. So, but like I said, this is just going to be a little push cart with some casters on the bottom. And so with that, oh, and I'll take you out here. The first thing we're going to have to do is trim off these edges on these 2x6s there, so they come rounded over, and I've got to trim that off because I need these to be flat edges for what I'm doing. So all those have to get trimmed down on the table saw, and same thing for these 2x4s. And then the 1x4s are fine, they come with the square edge already. So that's the first thing we're going to get started on. Alright, and as you can see here, everybody's got square edges now. And it just looks like it snowed, except it's sawdust. So the next step that I'm going to do, which is unnecessary for what this is being used for, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyways. So when you cut on a table saw, especially this, I mean, this isn't a, $3,000 table saw with a giant, feed table and all that. This is, what I can afford. You're gonna get some tooth marks here when you're doing something like this. I don't know if you can kind of tell on here, but it's just where the saw blade doesn't cut perfect. Yeah, there. Now you can kind of see it. It's happened a little bit more on these 2x6s because they're a little bit harder to handle on there, and my blade is getting a little dull, so they're kind of getting a little bit tough to push through. But at any rate, yeah, here's a good one right there. You can see that little saw blade mark there. So what's going to happen is these are going to get glued together with my biscuit joiner, and so they're going to get glued edge to edge. And so you want the edges to be as flush as possible. And so any kind of defects like that's going to hold it off the other board just that much. And so it won't be as good of a contact for the glue and everything. Like I said, this is a cart that's going to be used to haul around tools, so I mean, really, most likely it would never be an issue, because this isn't going to be like super load bearing. This isn't going to be abused too bad, but yeah, I kind of want to, I've got the tools to do it right, so that's what I'm going to do here. So what I've got is hand planer, and I'm going to set this to the lowest setting, which is going to be the 1/48th, just to take off just barely anything. Especially like on these 2x4s, these went pretty good through there. I don't really see any salt marks on these, so these I might not even do. But what I'm going to do here is just clamp it down here in just a minute, and we'll run that planer along the edge, and that'll clean it up and make it flush and flat. Alright, so I went ahead and decided I'm going to go ahead and do these anyways, even though the 2x4s aren't too bad, but I'm going to go ahead and just trim them up anyways. So what I've done here is I've got my table saw fence is clamped down, and then I've got clamps to that to hold the board in. And then on this side I've got my vise clamped down to this work table. And I've got all these strips that were cut off, and so I just put a strip on each side to protect the wood from the jaws of that vise, so it doesn't get like big holes in it. I mean, again, this is just a cart for tools and stuff, but I mean, why not keep it nice if you can? So well, we're gonna start hitting this thing with the planer. If you saw before, I put some paste wax here on the tabletop of the table saw, and that just helps the wood glide across it easier. And we're gonna do the same thing here to the planer, but first there's some residual junk on the bottom here that I need to clean off. Not too much, just from the last time I used it. I guess there's some sawdust and stuff packed in here. We'll clean it off really quick, and then we're going to put some wax on here. Of course, I've got it unplugged. I want to make sure when you're doing stuff like this to power tools, it's not plugged in. You don't want an accident. Every time I went to remeasure this for the ripping those boards, unplug it, because you're measuring, right by the blade. It's unplugged right now. Measuring right by the blade to get, your exact distance. And you just don't want any possibility of an accident happening. Accidentally, it's hard to accidentally turn it on because of the way the switch is made, but still, you just don't want it happening. that's it, just a real thin layer. That'll help it glide easier. Paste wax is what I use. Alright, I've got a few more of those to do. I'll bring you back once I'm totally done and we're back into the workshop. Alright, so just to explain real quick what happened there, when you saw me use the pull saw. So when you've got boards that are really bowed, like some of these are, so it's kind of twisted, but it's twisted just enough to where it can cause binding in the chop saw. You can see here, that's where I cut it. And so it can cause binding in the chop saw, and so the easiest thing for me that I've found is when it starts binding, just stop it and then come back through, finish the cut here with that, and then you just come back with a 80 grit sanding block and you'll hit that down until it's flush. The other one was a little bit smaller, it's over here, and it didn't have as much binding on it, but yeah, that's the easiest way to me. Instead of trying to power it through the chop saw, it's not good because it can pinch the blade and cause some kind of accident or issue to happen, or the blade to get stuck or whatever. You just don't want to deal with that, so just cut it and be safe. So this is what we're working with as far as the platforms. There's going to be two platforms for this cart, a lower platform and the upper platform. What we're going to do is we're going to biscuit joint these boards together. And so what this does, here's the biscuit joiner, is it cuts a slot in the edge of the boards, and you can do it on each board. And you fit in one of these footballs and then glue everywhere, in the slot and on the edges and everything, lots of glue. And then you clamp it all together, and then it makes one solid piece that's very strong. And doing that instead of plywood, because plywood is outrageously expensive. On top of that, the way I'm going to put this together is mortise and tenon. So like the pieces that are going up and down, the supports, leg supports, they're going to be, I'm going to be chiseling out holes. And so if I was to do this plywood is just not thick enough to really give a good joint for that. So this is much better for this. So, but yeah, what you do is, you get everything lined up exactly how you want it, and then you put in a mark across the joint. So you mark on each board, and that's where you make your cut on each side. So for this application, we can see we've got some good edges. Most of these don't have any knots. There's a knot here. You don't want to make a slot where this knot is. This one might be okay because we're going to make a slot in the middle, and so it'd be kind of just outside the knot. But I'm going to play it safe. We're going to do a joint here and a joint. We don't want to hit the knot, just to be safe. On this board, you got to be careful because we got two pretty big ones. So this one and this one for sure. You don't want to be cutting into that, and could cause chip out, and just avoid knots if you can. So we'll put one here, maybe one here, and then another one here. And like I said, avoid that. Put one on each side of that. So depending on the type of wood you're working with, you may or may not even have knots. This is just done with regular framing lumber, 2x4s, 2x6s, so they've got knots everywhere in them. I tried to pick ones that were pretty good as far as not having too many knots on the edges. So like I said, this one's good too. So just depends on the wood you've got. So we're gonna get this all lined up, and that'll be one. And then I've got the wood, the wood cut for the other one. We've got two exactly the same. So we'll get started on that now. Alright, so there's the pencil lines across each joint, and that's what you use to know exactly where to put the biscuit joiner when you go to make the slot. So as you can see here, this is how twisted a couple of these boards are. So you've got the step up there, and so the good thing about biscuit joining is that's going to correct that when you go to join it together, because you want to, part of it is you want to make sure you do the biscuit joining, the joints all from the same side. So what I mean is, like when you go to cut the slot in with it, I mean you need to do it all from this face of the boards. So don't like do some of these on this face and then flip it over and make new marks and do some on that face. Don't do that, because that'll mess up your joints and that'll defeat the purpose kind of doing biscuit joining. So because the way this works is when you do it all from this face, it'll line up all of this and fix it when you go to put it together. So then it'll be a mostly flat surface. It still will need sanding to make it perfect, but it will correct it for the most part. I mean, it'll be very little of a gap afterwards. It may be something like that where it's just a tiny bit, but that's easily fixable with a sander. If you have a big planer, fix it with that too, but those are very expensive and I do not. So alright, so now that we're just about ready to cut some slots, you can see this little red mark here. That's going to be the center of your slot. So you just want to make sure that's, you know, pretty close to the center. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. And then you just tighten that up. Make sure that nothing's going to move. And then where you got your marks, that's where you line up. And you just go make the cuts. And as you can see here, we got a nice slot right on center on that mark. And this is kind of how they fit in. They do fit in kind of tight. Usually got to hit it in with a dead blow hammer sometimes, but that's fine. But that's how it goes. So we're going to cut out the rest of these now. Alright, another useful item to note is before I unclamped this setup, after I did all the marks, I did put a label down at the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that just helps keep it in order, because you see these two pieces, you know, you might forget which one goes where, and that's not good. You want to keep everything exactly as it is after you've marked it, in exactly the same order, same face side up, everything. So put the 1, 2, 3, 4 here to make sure nothing gets flipped around or anything like that. Another thing, I'm sure you saw, it does make a mess. Alright, I've got the clamps in place craft papers down to catch the glue. So now we're just gonna throw glue everywhere and put some biscuits in and clamp it together. So here we go. And this is why when I glue up biscuit joints, I always put the paper down. Of course, the edge of the table didn't have paper on it right here, but that's fine. Let's clean that up really quick. The rest of that can stay there because it's easy to get off with the chisel once it dries. There's a look underneath with lots of glue pouring out. And one last thing to note, or that I wanted to share, was you can kind of see, so the line there isn't like exactly, I mean it's really close. It's very close, but it's not exactly lined up. And the problem is once you get the stuff kind of half glued together, it's really hard to get them to move that way because you've got all that glue and the biscuits and everything. So you can get it close, but getting it like exact is near impossible. I mean that's a lot of gluing surface area and all that. So, but as long as it's really close, it'll be fine. You don't want it off too much, but I mean that's like maybe, that's the worst one, and it might be a 1/16 of an inch. It's probably less than that though. The only thing that you'll have is that, you know, the edges won't be exact. I mean, I can barely even feel this lip here. And easy way to get rid of that is either sand it with your sander, or I can take my planer and run across that 2 or 3 times and it'll be no big deal. So really up to you and how you want to solve that. Or if you want to sit here and fiddle, banging on it really hard and rounding over your ends, you can try that. But my experience, just getting it, very close is good enough with the biscuit joints. And so with that, we've still got this one over here to do. Alright guys, the battery's dying. I'm going to try to bring you back whenever the final glue up and clamp together is ready, okay? Alright, let's see if the battery lasts long enough. Okay, so the middle of this one was not quite going in as much as I wanted, and you can't just crank down on the outside, these 2 bar clamps. You can't just crank down on them super hard, because then it'll make the pieces kind of buckle a little bit. And so to prevent that, you could put some pieces of wood across here and then clamp those down this way, and that'll help keep them straight. But that's just a lot of extra work. On top of having this glue come out, that means those get glued in and you have to rip them off, and then those boards are useless afterwards. And so it's just too much for me to deal with. I don't like doing that. So like I said, you use the bar clamps, get it pretty as tight as you can. Like the other one was perfect, it was good. This one, I just added these 2 in the middle because it was around, there was a lot of knots in the middle, and I'm thinking that's why it was, they were bowed a good bit, and so it was kind of hard to get together. But in the end, it's looking pretty good. We did have an issue here. I forgot to put in 1 biscuit slot and this side, so I had already put the tool away and reset it back to, you have to set it, undo where it's at to put it in the box to make it fit. And so unfortunately I had to guesstimate as close as I could um, to where the setting was before, and as you can see it was not close enough, but we can take care of that. And again, this is just a tool cart anyways, it's not a huge deal. This isn't a tabletop. If this was a tabletop, you'd have to sand a lot, or plane it with the planer, which the planer will work. But like I said, it's not ideal, but for what this is, no big deal. I mean, it's going to be a cart that you throw tools in and push it around. So I'll probably still work to plane that a little bit and sand it a lot to get it mostly flat, but we'll see. That was my mistake for missing a biscuit joint, so I don't know how that happened. I got distracted or something, but at any rate, that's going to do it for now. This will need a couple days to dry and before I can move on. So as always, thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys next time.